Oh, Lupin, you're going to Babylon, aren't you? Don't forget, dark holes await you. Dark holes. Oh, Lupin, I love you.
Knock it off, will you? Knock it off! Ah! Ah! Ah!
Oh, Lupin, I love you.
Knock it off! Knock it off! Oh! Ah! Usually I don't mind this, but I encourage it. But seeing I'm into younger women, you know. Oh, I've loved so many men. You are the one right, yeah, sure, yeah. Oh, Lupin, you're going to Babylon, aren't you? Yeah? What's that got to do with anything? Dark hole! Yeah, I'm expecting to see you right now. Oh, Lupin! Oh, hang on. Now I know how Fujiko feels whenever I come into her room wanting to have sex with her and she's not in the mood. You can see it in the first part 2 title scenes, the sequences. Now I can see why sometimes she's not up for it. Nick here, and welcome to my review of Lupin the Third, The Legend of the Gold of Babylon. Yeah, long title again. Long title film. So, Lupin the Third 3. Let's just say Lupin the Third 3 or Babylon. The third Lupin the film, third feature film, and this one, this time Lupin is wearing his pink jacket. Side note: this will be the only film OVA, original video animation, or special to feature Lupin wearing his Part 3 series pink jacket. Most of them are with the red from Part 2 or the green from Part 1 jackets. Although some of the more recent ones have featured his Part 4-5 blue jacket, and even one special has him in a black jacket for part of that special. So that's interesting. But this is the only one to feature the pink jacket from Part 3. And it does come out the same year as Part 3's. Well, Part 3 was 1984 to 85. This film came out in 85, presumably finishing up after Part 3. Coming out after Part 3 came out, but I'm not certain. Otherwise, like with the first two films, it's coming out at the same time when they came out during Part 2's run. This one will be coming out during Part 3's run. Otherwise, it's after Part 3 finished up. Anyway, so the plot of Gold of Babylon is that in New York City, they decided to go to New York for this one. Lupin and the gang have decided to search for the Gold of Babylon, where they encounter a gangster mob are also after the Gold of Babylon, and also this old lady called Rosetta knows a lot about the Gold of Babylon, more than she's letting on, but she does give some kind of clues and helps out the team. So Lupin Goemon, who gets more to do in this film than he did in Castle Cagliostro. That was the one negative of that film I had. And one thing this film does better is that Goemon actually gets stuff to do in this film. And Jigen go off looking for the Gold of Babylon, whilst Fujiko, in some points, she's pretending to be the girlfriend, that she's posing as the girlfriend for one of the mob bosses, and then she disappears for a bit, and then she comes back later on helping Lupin and the gang to retrieve the Gold of Babylon, and of course does her usual, steals it from them and takes it for herself before getting captured by the villains and having to be rescued by Lupin later on. Oh, Fujiko, you're so predictable when you're not well. Yeah, there was that one shot when they were in Babylon where she was like, oh yes, definitely help you get the gold, and you know she's going to betray him or do something once he's got it. Anyway, so yeah, whilst that's all going on, Inspector Zenigata, after failing to capture Lupin in the first half an hour of the film, he's put on to having to host the ICPO Miss ICPO show thing, where police women from different countries come and have to just show off, have this fashion show thing. We get introduced to 5, one from the United States. Naturally, this film's taking place in the United States. One from China, who actually gets the most to do. One from Russia, so you would actually think there'd be some US-Russia conflict in this film. Like, we saw a little bit of that in Castle Cagliostro, but actually no, they get on decently. And one from Kenya, plus also the winner, who is an Italian woman. And eventually Zenigata, along with these 5 women, are instructed to hunt down Lupin and the gang. And that's basically that story. We get Zenigata and his team of, let's say his angels, as a reference to Charlie's Angels. His angels are trying to capture the gang, and yeah, that's basically the plot. And they do have some sort of really good espionage-esque moments where they try to capture them on the train in towards the end of the first hour. That's some very good stuff there, and there's some really good action scenes through there. It's also around that point that the Chinese girl starts falling in love with Goemon, which is interesting character development on both of their parts. Goemon is out of the 3 men of the group, Goemon's the least likely to fall in love, although there is a OVA 2 years later from this one where he does get engaged. I haven't seen that one yet, so... But out of the 3, he's the least likely to fall in love or fall for women, even though Jigen's got women problems. It's Goemon who, because of his sterner, somber attitude... Is that the right word? His attitude being, of course, a samurai, that he's less likely to fall in love. Of course, the one who's the most likely to fall in love is Lupin, because he's the womanizer, and he's easily attracted to women, especially Fujiko, which, of course, gets him into lots more trouble than he usually does because of that. But yeah, it's quite interesting seeing this Chinese policewoman and Goemon have some sort of affection for each other at the very least. It's interesting. It gives Goemon another level of character and something more for him to do, whilst the Chinese woman, it gives her a bit more of a personality and a bit more presence than some of the other ones, especially as the Italian one hardly does anything after she wins the competition. She hardly does anything. I mean, the Russian and the American get along better more than she has anything to do. And the Russian and the American, they're not like best buddies like you might get if they're not fighting like cats and dogs, then they would be best buddies. But no, they're strictly neutral, which actually kind of works if they had more to do. But yeah, these, apart from the Chinese girl, these women don't really have a lot to do, especially the Italian one. She literally is, because she won, the others aren't really happy about that, but because they feel like she was not as good as them or some of the others. But after that, she's just absent for most of the story. Surely she doesn't get as much involved. But yeah, these angel characters, they didn't really contribute much to the story. They're just there. The Chinese girl has something to do at least, but after the train stuff, they're just there. They don't even help. When at the end, you got Zenigata going after Lupin and Fujiko, and then going on the parachuting down. And on top of the Statue of Liberty, you just got the girls and Jigen. Maybe Gonmon's there as well. No, he's not. Just Jigen talking with some of these ladies. They didn't even bother trying to arrest him or trying to help the others down. They're just sitting there talking a little bit or just watching. So what was the point? Anyway, as for the villains, we've got some really good stuff with the villains, but I have to say, the fly swapping thing, where on the third SWAT, we didn't even see the second one. Well, on the third SWAT, one of the mafia bosses poisons somebody by pressing a button and it poisons them. It wasn't actually made that clear on the first time he used it to kill someone. But the second time he uses it to kill someone, he's able to inject a poison into them. So, yeah, death by fly swat now. As if death by tickling from tiny little hands, as seen in the first episode of Lupin the Third, Part 1. Or a big, massive robot with a giant drill penis, as seen in the movie / special Jigen's Gravestone. Wasn't stupid enough. You now got a fly swatter that can inject poison into you. Many of the Bond villains are looking at the villains of this series and going like, yeah, this is even for an outlandish series, this is too outlandish. Even Austin Powers villains are going, yeah, you're a bit over the top in your villains' killing methods. It's not to say that you can't have outlandish and over-the-top villains and killing methods, but sometimes this series can go a little too far in places, and this one, fly swap poison thing. Oh, even Moonraker and Die Another Day, the Bond films, they're considered the silliest. Don't have those. What silliest besides the parodies? Even they don't have those. Okay. As for the villains themselves, yeah, they're pretty good. They're good for what they are. There's this guy who's in charge of the archaeological dig, and he's the one who Fujiko supposedly dates. Although there's a bit where somehow Lupin disguises himself as Fujiko, and they blows up the suit, and then it's revealed to be Lupin. Another ridiculous reveal. It's a bit ridiculous. I know this is a ridiculous franchise. It takes a lot of Looney Tunes inspired comedy, but there are times when it can go a bit too outlandish, and this is another case. As for the other mafia boss, he's a pretty the one who has the fly swatting poisoning thing, but he's still a really intimidating villain. I think he's a pretty good one. So yeah, it's we got a good story here. It's a good, simple story. I have heard this one was a bit of a messy production, and with problems with the screenwriting. And yeah, there is some notable stuff. It is a bit too messy. It definitely feels a bit more outlandish than. It definitely feels like one of the more outlandish installments of the Lupin's franchise. It's definitely cranking up the comedy a lot more. Possibly taking more inspiration from the Part 3 series, possibly. But it definitely cranks up the absurdity a little bit more than past and maybe some future installments, although I can't really say for the specials. But definitely at this point, it was definitely cranking up the absurdity and the ridiculousness, which might inspire some later stuff, but not to the as much of an extreme. The middle of the film is quite interesting, where they go from New York to where Babylon supposedly was in the Middle East, and Lupin has to rescue the statue before being caught out. And he's got some visions of a young Rosetta who's following them all over the place. He's able to get the treasure out, and then Fujiko steals it, and then the pursuers are right behind him, literally in the next scene. And it's like a couple of hours must have passed, but somehow these guys have caught up quickly. It's like this, we missed a little bit. And eventually the villains get their gold statue back once they capture Fujiko, and the ICPO women, like I said, they basically do nothing. Eventually we return to New York when Lupin realizes that a second Babylon Tower is underneath New York City, and he and his gang go to steal the treasure underneath that, and then he goes off and rescues Fujiko. And it's actually a really good scene where they're escaping potential death by going down the sewers, going down the waterways. And it's some really exciting and epic moments as they go down the waterways down underneath the city until they're able to escape. And then we get to the climax. Okay, if the fly swatting poison thing and the Fujiko disguise that blows up and to reveal Lupin were, and other elements of the film were over the top, ridiculous, outlandish stuff, the final scene, the couple of scenes, the final 5 to 10 minutes, this goes okay. I've heard Secret Mystery of Mamo is a bit too sci-fi in the third act, but this one basically has aliens in it. It's revealed that aliens took the Tower of Babylon and dropped it in New York, or what would become New York, and they tried to take all the gold, but as Fujiko says, it belongs to the humans and her, but mostly the humans. Well, humans, but mostly her. One or the other. But yeah, she's a greedy character. They all are, really, but she's especially greedy. So Lupin manages to get the gold go down below, and it goes back into the city. And of course, that brings us to our climax. It's also revealed that Rosetta is actually an alien, sometimes mistaken to be a god. Yes, it's a bit crazy. It's a bit of a crazy ending with all this reveal with aliens and the gold going everywhere. It's a bit crazy. And like I said, those ICP women just sit around talking to Jigen on top of the not the Eiffel Tower, the Statue of Liberty. Just sit there and talk and watch the events just happen. It's weird. Goemon gets a little bit to do in the climax. That's good. This film is definitely making up for his lack of involvement in Castle Cagliostro. But yeah, this is just a really, really crazy film. So yeah, earlier in the film, in the first act, they spent about 5 minutes doing a motorcycle chase on top of this building face thing in New York. It's just a bit strange. So, Lupin the Third, the Legend of the Gold of Babylon. This is a very strange film. It's after the more grounded, down to earth, different direction, grown up characters of Castle of Cagliostro. This film, 6 years later, decides to go all out on usual Lupin absurdity and silliness. It's definitely the more comedic installment. I'm not sure about Mystery of Mamo, but that one's apparently how you write a Lupin story at time of the late 70s. But certainly, come 1985, they're certainly trying to do something more akin to Part 2 and Part 3, but with a bit more outlandish than possibly those ones. I have heard people compare it to say it feels more like an extended Part 3 episode, or rather a 4-parter, to be honest. 4-part story from the Part 3 series, but yeah, it's just a bit strange. It goes all out crazy, all out silly. Don't get me wrong, Lupin is a silly series anyway, most of the time, especially from Part 2 onwards, but this one just goes especially ridiculous in places, and but that being said, it's still really fun and entertaining, really enjoyable, lots of great comedy, great animation, some great characters, and I watched the version with the 2018 English dub, which meant we got Tony Oliver as the voice of Lupin and Michelle Ruff as the voice of Fujiko. Woohoo! Two of the best of the English voice dub actors. Also, Jigen, fantastic voice dub there as well, and Goemon and Zenny Carter. The usual, the Part 2, Part 4, Part 5 English dub casts are in this one, which makes me happy because I think they're the best of the English voice dubbers. Yeah, definitely the best of the English voice cast for Lupin dubbing, English dubs is the Part 2, 4, 5 cast, which do this film. Woo! Most the other voice actors also do really great jobs as well for our supporting cast. Although I think the Rosetta does sound her older voice actress sounds a bit too young for the character in her older persona, possibly, but I won't hold it against her. Like I said, some great animation. I did hear that from it after episode 20 in Part 3, the animation did go a bit downhill for Part 3. But with a potential different team, the animation looks really great. My only complaint is the design of Fujiko. This is possibly one of my least... Fujiko's design changes almost every other appearance she's in. And I think this is one of my least favourite designs of the character. I don't know what's going on with her face. It looks a bit like squinted. It doesn't look natural. So I have an issue there. Everybody else looks fine. It's just... Fujicakes that looks a bit damaged. Well, in the face it looks a bit squished, a bit squinted. It's a bit awkward with her. I don't know. It's a bit awkward. I don't know why they always change her looks. She's the one who constantly changes every other time. I don't get it why. Just stick to one design like the other 4 characters. Just stick to one design and stay that way for a while. Just don't have to change it all the time. And this one is definitely one of the weaker cases of... definitely one of the weaker incarnations. But besides that, I think the animation is really great. Some really great action moments in there. And this keeps the story flowing and moving pretty well, despite how absurd it is. And you can tell it is a little bit of a messy script. The music by Yoko Ono, I probably pronounced that wrong, fantastic. Although there are some points in the film where it does remind me of Bill Conti's For Your Eyes Only film score, especially the track in For Your Eyes Only where Bond is on skis getting away from assassins, also on skis or on a motorbike. It's the very long chase scene in that film where he goes down a ski slope at one point. And there is some music tracks here, and you can also hear this in the trailer for the 2018 dub, that you can hear this, the music that sounds a lot like that For Your Eyes Only music I was talking about in the film, and it just reminded me of that track from For Your Eyes Only by Bill Conti. So I'm guessing they took some inspiration from For Your Eyes Only for the soundtrack in places, or at least for that track. And on the whole, I think Legend of the Gold of Babylon is a good film, but an outlandish plot with some outlandish things inside the plot. But the story is very outlandish, even for Lupin. It goes a bit too far in places, such as villain murder methods, and the final conclusion of the film where they're just waiting for aliens, and aliens turn up, and it's a bit crazy. It's a bit too outlandish, even for this franchise, which usually does go a bit too outlandish in places. But even for this franchise, this one goes a bit too far in places. But the comedy is still really fun. Characters are great, and the designs, minus possibly Fujiko, are pretty great, and the cast are all amazing as usual. And there are some plot elements that don't feel needed, like those ICPO women just don't do anything. The closest we get is a potential romantic attachment between Goemon and the Chinese ICPO woman. But that's as far as it goes. They kind of fall for each other, especially her for him. But they don't really go a lot with it, apart from her crying out for him. Yeah, it just felt like they were just thrown in just because. It felt like they were in a completely different story, and then they just gave up with them. They could have contributed much. They could have been another obstacle to get in the way. They could have. They tried to be anyway, like on the train, but they could have done a bit more to actually be obstacles, try and actually stop Lupin and the gang. But in the end, they just felt pointless after the train scene. So yeah, it's a mixed bag for this film. I had a good time with it, but it's definitely a mixed bag reception. I will be giving Lupin the Third: The Legend of the Gold of Babylon a 7 out of 10. An 8, and I did have a really good time with it. I really enjoyed it, but the plot is a bit too outlandish, even for Lupin the Third, which is a outlandish series at points. There's times where it goes deadly serious, but most of the time it does go a bit too. It is a very comedic, outlandish series. But this one in particular, I think the plot was a bit too outlandish this time round. Not just a comedy; it just went a bit too outlandish in the plot, just a little bit more than it usually does. And some things just didn't quite work with it, but it's still a really fun, enjoyable adventure film, and it's still got some really great moments, characters, casting, etc. It's some really great moments and really enjoyable, but the plot isn't as great as you'd expect. It's not even great, the typical Lupin standard. It's just great, good at least. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, that'll do. It's good. It's not a patch on Castle Cagliostro, though. No way. I mean, this one is probably the more fun film of the two, but Castle Cagliostro just did so much more better. The only thing I think Castle Cagliostro did weaker than Gold of Babylon is Goemon, because Goemon has hardly anything to do in that film, whilst here he is essential. Most of the time, and also he gets that love interest in the Chinese police officer, who's pretty much the only thing that those women do once the actual competition is done, and the only one who actually does anything after the train scene. Actually, the train scene they do stuff apart from the Italian one, but after that, it's just her being in a romantically attached to Goemon. That's and him still being romantically attached to her as well at points. After that bit, that's the only thing those women really do. It's just that. They're just the Chinese woman and Goemon's relationship. That's about it. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching this review. The next Lupin the Third film would come out 10 years later in 1995. Farewell to Nostradamus, I believe. Of course, the franchise would not be so dormant as specials started coming out in 1989. I will not be reviewing those just yet. There's only really one I can actually access, and that's a little bit later as well as OVA starting in 1987. But yeah, as for films, they're going to take a 10-year gap until Farewell to Nostradamus, and Lupin will be wearing his red jacket in that one, by the way. So yeah, we'll be seeing the red jacket debut in film format. He probably already did in the specials and OVAs, but in film format it'll be its debut. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Lupin the Third: The Secrets of the Gold of Babylon. No, Legend. Hello, everyone. Oh, God, Fujiko, you're back. It gives Going On to another level of personality, and it also gives this Chinese woman. It gives Going On something new. Austin Powers is saying even, but Gilmore gets quite a bit to do, or at least compared to Cheegan anyway. He gets, especially after part 2. So I'm guessing they took some inspiration from Fury's. Not, I mean, it's more fun, but Chaos to Academy Maestro far superior. So anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching the next Lupin the film. Fuck. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time for... Okay. Lupin and... Rosita? I remember that earlier, which is good because that was for the actual review. I swear one day we're going to have a Lupin Fujiko love scene, maybe for Mystery of Malmo.